Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is fear and how we can transform the experience of fear from paralysis to fuel, to allow our fears to fuel us because there's so much energy there. And maybe help us to move into a richer experience of life and expression. So good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning, and welcome to everyone else who's joining us. And before we get started talking about fear, let's take a couple minutes to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the pressure, the temperature, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, good evening, Gia. Welcome. So good to have you joining us this morning. So today we are talking about fear. And I remember, fortunately, a while back, that I used to say that fear was my overriding emotion or experience, and that fear drove me. Really, it was at the foundation of everything. I was afraid of life. I was afraid of what might happen. I was afraid of all kinds of amorphous threats, always feeling threatened and fearful. And I'm so delighted to not be in that space anymore. And the fact that I'm not in that space lets me know that if you're living there, you don't have to be in that space forever either, that there is a way out. And it's not like I can give a prescription for what that way out is. However, we talk about it a lot, that cultivating a trust in life, like believing in life as an energy that is unfolding through us, for us, and through us, rather than to us, goes a long way to alleviating that fear. It doesn't mean that we won't have moments of fearfulness, or that we won't be facing our fears. I think that that's actually a really important thing, is when we recognize our fears, to not try to deny them, but to face them instead. And when we face them, then we can gain some insight into what they're about. What's going on? Where did that come from? And how can we diffuse that? Because fear is a really powerful, concentrated energy. And if we can either diffuse it or redirect it, then there's so much power in that, right? And if we can notice that at the heart of fear is a lack of trust, right? It's a lack of trust in ourselves to be able to handle a situation, to be able to be discerning about a situation. This brings up an interesting point around this that I don't have an answer for, but I found it fascinating. It's apparently a condition that actually exists where someone has, what do they call it? I want to call it like pathological fantasies, where the person would allow themselves to go into this space of imagining, and the imagination was so powerful that they actually believed that it was true. And so they have learned to not allow themselves to go into that imaginative space. And as a result of this condition, they don't trust themselves to be able to navigate things well, because they have seen that their imagination is more powerful than their presence, than their actual life. So Gia says, your presence, Mira, is like having that prescription which motivates me that it's possible to transform fears into a power that's working for, not against us. I'm grateful for having you. Gia, thank you so much. Thank you. And I'm very grateful to have you and Rosalind and all the other folks that watch and engage with us in these conversations. As far as the fear goes, I thought that condition that I was speaking with this person about, it's so fascinating because there's a deep underlying mistrust of themselves. They can't allow themselves to go into this imaginal space. Fortunately, they're aware when they start doing it, but their imagination is so vivid that they do not distinguish between the truth of what they've imagined and what's actually happened. And I've heard for a long time that the mind does not distinguish between something real and something vividly imagined. And we all have this capacity to create a visceral experience from our imaginings. So we can imagine a situation and we can feel shame or sadness or anger or joy or elation or delight. We can create that. And some people just have apparently a much stronger capacity for that, insofar as they truly don't know what was real and what wasn't real. So that puts a whole other dimension to this notion of fear, right? Because another thing that I wrestled with for so many years, and still do actually, but it's not agonizing in the way that it used to be, is what's real and what's not real. I was listening this morning to a presentation by a woman cosmologist who was talking about the world being a hologram and talking about consciousness. I was dozing as I was listening, so I missed part of it, but very, very fascinating to be looking at science. This woman is an Oxford trained physicist. Let me see if I can find her name. And she is making a case to prove that the universe is a hologram. Her name is Jude Currivan, Judecurrivan. She's got some pretty heavy duty credentials and is speaking about kind of a pretty radical concept and construct. And I think you could also look for, I think she's done a thing called Conscious Cosmos. Anyway, very, very interesting in talking about the nature of consciousness and what's real and what's not real, and how we project consciousness or we project reality. And so that goes back to this notion of fear. And when we live in fear, what happens is we often create the circumstance we're afraid of. So, for example, this is the easiest example that I can think of. Driving. If you're afraid as a driver, you're a dangerous driver, because you're creating a hazard, erratic behaviors, perhaps, not being able to flow with the movement of traffic. The self-consciousness around being a fearful driver creates dangerous situations oftentimes. And we can see that in other situations where, let's say you're walking down a city street, and if you have an air of confidence, it's unlikely that you're going to be approached by someone who wants to take advantage of you. If you seem unsure, if you seem timid, then that might be an invitation to someone who is wanting to take advantage. So, it's really interesting that we attract those very things that we're trying to defend against, typically. And I think that there's a difference between fear and preparedness. Preparedness could be driven by fear, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. You could be looking at what are the requirements of a situation, what are the possible things that might arise, and you can be doing that without fear. And just from that, thinking things through, it's not planning for the worst and expecting the best. It's just thinking things through and preparing, creating a circumstance where you're taken care of. So I'm planning this trip. I'm going to be driving out from Pennsylvania to California. And so I'm going to be in my car a lot with my cat. And I'm thinking about what is going to make my trip easy, and what do I need to prepare myself to address possible things that might arise for over that period of time. So I've really been having fun thinking this through, and tricking out my car with all these goodies. And like I even got a little vacuum cleaner and an AC DC converter, and a really good ice chest, and hazard lights, and some other things, that bungee cords, things that could come in handy if I had some kind of weird thing happen. And you can't ever cover every eventuality, but it's been really fun to be imagining this trip and imagining what kinds of things I might encounter, so that I can take good care of myself on the way there. And so one of the ways that we can deal with fear, rather than being paralyzed by it, is to step into it. And even sometimes it can be helpful to say, well, what's the worst? What is underlying that fear? What does it feel like? That's another thing, is like when we experience fear, to be able to get underneath it, what can we do to calm ourselves, to ease ourselves? We can use our breath. We could do tapping. I have a client who experienced a lot of abuse growing up, and there's been a huge resistance to going back to her child self, and even just offering love and support to her child self, like huge resistance. And it's fascinating to me. And what seems to be what arose yesterday is that she was afraid to go back to find out what else had happened that she didn't remember. She was afraid of seeing something terrible. And she is not the only client that has had that experience in doing the work that we do, that there's a fear of seeing something way worse. And in my experience so far, the fear of discovering something is often way worse than the thing itself. Rosalind says, where in California are you going? Maybe you can visit my healing room. I live in Paso Robles, which is midway between San Francisco and LA. I am going to be in Mariposa County. And I'm going to make a trip for a couple of days up to San Francisco also, because I have a bunch of clients there that I have never had the opportunity to meet. So it sounds like, I don't know how far you are from Mariposa County, but it sounds like it might not be on the way. And how sweet of you to extend the invitation, Rosalind. Much appreciated. And Gia says, inner child healing has helped me in so many ways, as almost everything comes from my childhood or teenage, as much as I have learned. It's true. It's true. So this one person was like, I don't want to go back there. I just want to work on what's here now. I said, well, it's that little kid that's running things that are going on now. And until we go and make peace with that little kid and love her up and give her the support that she so desperately needs, this stuff in the moment isn't gonna get healed, because this little girl is still believing in all the fairy tales she was promised in her upbringing through her church and through her family, and her life has not complied with that fairy tale vision. And the little girl is still holding out to make it true beyond any beyond anything that reality might present. And that little kid is just so determined and committed to have the fairy tale. And until we can give her love enough to recognize that that fairy tale is unlikely, but that doesn't mean that life can't be good, she's going to keep torturing the adult self. And it's not that she's deliberately torturing, it's that she just really wants this fairy tale that she was sold. So I think you nailed it, Gia, is that stuff comes from childhood, and it gets exacerbated as we get older, as we have other instances that then reinforce the kinds of things from childhood as well. And it's so often true that the fear of something is way worse than the thing itself. That if we allow ourselves to be present, we can get through pretty much anything. If we live in fear of it, what's happening is that we're creating all this resistance. It takes tons of energy, for one, and it also helps to create the very thing or perpetuate the very thing that we're resisting. Just think of the driver, the nervous driver. They're waiting for an accident. Well, they're driving like a crazy person, right? They're driving in a way that it's not even defensive driving. It's unpredictable, right? They're not, because they're so afraid, they're not in a place to be able to respond appropriately, right? So I know that there are other situations like that too. Like, for instance, I'm not a skier, but skiing, if you're really afraid, you're going to be stiff. And if you're stiff, you're not going to be able to be responsive to the demands of the slope. So we by relieving our fear, we extend our capacities. And it's easier said than done. I recognize that. It's not just like, oh, okay, I'm afraid. All right, I'll stop being afraid. I know it's not that easy. I mean, in some instances, it is actually that easy. But I remember years and years ago, I went to a certification program that done by Anthony Robbins these days. Anyway, one of the things that we did was he climbed up to the top of a telephone pole, stood up on top of this telephone pole, and jumped off, wearing a harness with all kinds of wires and ropes and everything. And I remember I was scared. There's no question I was scared. I got up, I'm trying to step up to the top, and my leg was vibrating like crazy, and my heart was racing, and it was very scary, and it was exhilarating all at the same time. But it was really scary. And having done that, it was really, really exhilarating. It was so enlivening to be able to face your fear and not just push past it, but allow. I think that's the key, is to allow the fear, allow yourself to take the action you need to take, rather than resisting the fear. By resisting the fear, you're amplifying the fear. So the idea is recognize and allow the fear, and allow that to be okay, rather than judging it or trying to push it away or trying to strong arm it into something else. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be afraid. And then what? You know, so some fears we can diffuse. We can disappear. Other fears, we can allow our fear and move forward in appropriate manners anyway. The idea, and as we do that, that fear can become fuel, right? We can use that energy by allowing, we can use that energy to channel ourselves into more productive expression. So face and embrace your fear, and rather than resist it, and see what happens when there's that allowing. And so that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning on Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel, and at 9 a.m. Eastern. So, and I invite you to go check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living. And I just am so grateful to you for sharing these musings and moments of exploring new ways of thinking and being. And until next time, so much love to you.